I think my timing was a little bit off for the last one. I should have finished that one by reading through verse 24. Um, I'm going to tack it on to this one. I think we'll be fine. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry Jesus's cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with them they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. Just an aside, the word here for Messiah is Christos. It's the same word that we use for Jesus Christ. It means anointed, it means Messiah. They are saying that the Christos, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now. That was from 9 a.m. and following. Mark now tells us what happens at noon. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it for him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the temple of the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was God's son." There are also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Joseph and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there are many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. When evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned that from the centurion that he was dead, he gave the body to Joseph. Then Joseph brought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth, laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body was laid. A few different notes here. First off, we have a large crowd that is gathering for the execution. We know that we know from history that large crowds would gather for executions. We know this not just from history in the Bible, but history of other places in the Roman Empire and in other empires in the world at that time, all the way to our history. People would go to hangings in the Old West to see justice done. We know that that's why the chief priests are there, to see their justice done. Must have been eerie to see darkness sweep over the land at from noon until 3. And then at 3 o'clock, Jesus cries out In Aramaic, my God, why have you forsaken me? These are the words of the 22nd Psalm. This is how Psalm 22, verse 1 begins, which is one of the reasons that on Good Friday we say it. I say that this is an Aramaic because Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani is Aramaic, which indicates that Jesus was at least bilingual, at least knew Hebrew and Aramaic. Aramaic was the lingua franca of this very eastern edge of the Roman Empire. It had been the common language of the Persian Empire. The Abba that Jesus says in the Lord's Prayer and in other places is that Father. It's like a papa. That's Aramaic as well. Jesus is crying out. He's crying out. He is repeating some of the words of the Psalms. He is struggling. He cries out. Some of the people thinks he's calling to Elijah, thinking that there is a similarity between the words. When Jesus dies, the curtain in the temple, the curtain that divided the holiest place of the temple, the Holy of Holies, splits apart, splits asunder. Mark, who is very good at making chiasms, making things that start here and finish here, has in essence made his gospel in its whole a chiasm. In Mark, I think it's 1, I need to double check the verse. I want to say, well, I can look it up. In Mark 1, verse 10, the heavens are torn open. God's Spirit descends on Jesus. In Mark 15, verse 38, the barrier between the holies of holies is torn open. God is moving in the world. In both places, there is a tearing, there is a ripping asunder, and a division between God and reality is removed. In the first part of the gospel, God is ripping apart the heavens so that his Spirit may pour in. In the end of the gospel, the idea of containing God behind the Holy of Holies is also being destroyed. We have the centurion saying the words, truly this man was God's son, reflecting what God himself says in the baptism, this is my son. Again, we have that beginning and repeating. The story told in essence twice, and Mark will do this over and over again. This centurion gives the strongest statement of faith in the entirety of the Gospel of Mark. It is the only one that is not contradicted at some later point. Peter, indeed, gives that declaration in the middle of the Gospel. But then Peter begins to rebuke Jesus. This centurion says, for reasons that we don't quite understand, this was God's son. Did the centurion encounter Jesus earlier in Jesus's journey? Did the centurion come to this faith only through the events of this last week in Jerusalem? We cannot know. All we know is that this centurion, who has sworn an oath to the emperor, who has affirmed that the emperor is divine and a son of God, is saying that this man, this Jew who has just breathed his last, is the Son of God. God has worked a tremendous change on this centurion. God works a tremendous change in all of us. As it is evening, it is the day of preparation, the day before the Sabbath. This is before sundown. Joseph of Arimathea comes and asks for the body. It is actually surprising that Jesus died this quickly. This gives us an idea of how much he had been beaten beforehand. Often people would be on the cross for a day and a half, sometimes 2 days, before exposure and exhaustion killed them. That Jesus dies in a matter of 6 hours gives us an idea of how physically weakened he had been by what he had gone through during the night. He is on the cross only 6 hours. He dies. Women are there. His disciples, his male disciples, have abandoned him. But Mary Magdalene, Joseph, Salome, and many other women who have followed him to Jerusalem are still with him, mourning him. Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, asks for the body, places it in a tomb. This indicates that the council was not monolithic, that not everyone was in agreement with the decision to crucify Jesus. Not everyone who is different from us is opposed to us. Joseph of Arimathea was a part of the council. He did not stand for the council. Jesus, no doubt, had supporters among the Pharisees, among some of the Sadducees. Not the majority, certainly, but some of them. He takes the body. He lays it in the tomb. Think of how quickly this had happened. Yesterday, Maundy Thursday, was the Passover, was the holiest time in Judaism. They went from that holy meal to a crucifixion in less than 24 short hours. He had been supported when he marched in with the throngs on Palm Sunday. He had been cheered at the temple by the crowds on Tuesday. And very quickly, in the middle of the night, he's arrested, beaten, tried, convicted, crucified, and dead before anyone can react. The forces of our world, the forces lusting after their own power, lusting after their own control, wanting to do things their way, do not give up easily. Empires do strike back. But no matter what that empire is, God will have a response to. And we will see that response in just a bit.